Numbers chapter 11. Numbers chapter 11. There's going to be a theme here in Numbers chapter 11, and I want you to see if you can pick it out. Numbers chapter 11, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers. Verse 1. And the people complained in the hearing of the Lord about their misfortunes. And when the Lord heard it, his anger was kindled, and the fire of the Lord burned among them, and consumed some outlying parts of the camp. Then the people cried out to Moses, and Moses prayed to the Lord, and the fire died down. So the name of that place was called Terabah, because the fire of the Lord burned among them. Now the rabble that was among them had a strong craving. And the people of Israel also wept again and said, "Oh, that we had meat to eat. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt. It cost nothing. The cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and garlic. But now our strength is dried up, and there is nothing at all but this manna to look at." Now the manna was like coriander seed, and its appearance was like that of bdellium. The people went about and gathered it and ground it into hand mills, or beat it into mortars, and boiled it in pots and made cakes of it. And the taste of it was like the taste of cakes baked with oil. When the dew fell upon the camp in the night, the manna fell with it. Moses heard the people weeping throughout their clans, every one at the door of his tent. And the anger of the Lord blazed hotly, and Moses was displeased. Moses said to the Lord, "Why have you dealt ill with your servant? And why have I not found favor in your sight, that you lay the burden of all this people on me? Did I conceive all this people? Did I give them birth that you should say to me, 'Carry them in your bosom, as a nurse carries a nursing child, to the land that you swore to give their fathers?' Where am I to get meat to give to all this people? For they weep before me and say, 'Give us meat that we may eat.' I'm not able to carry all this people alone. The burden is too heavy for me. If you will treat me like this, kill me at once, if I find favor in your sight, that I may not see my wretchedness." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Gather for me 70 men of the elders of Israel, whom you know to be the elders of the people and officers over them, and bring them to the tent of meeting, and let them take their stand with you. And I will come down and talk with you there, and I will take some of the Spirit that is on you and put it on them, and they shall bear the burden of the people with you, so that you may not bear it yourself alone. And say to the people, 'Consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow you shall eat meat, for you have wept in the hearing of the Lord, saying, Who will give us meat to eat? For it is better for us in Egypt. Therefore the Lord will give you meat, and you shall eat. You shall not eat just 1 day, or 2 days, or 5 days, or 10 days, or 20 days, but a whole month, until it comes out of your nostrils and becomes loathsome to you, because you have rejected the Lord, who is among you, and have wept before him, saying, Why did we come out of Egypt?' But Moses said, 'The people among whom I am number 600,000 on foot, and you have said, I will give them meat, that they may eat a whole month. Shall flocks and herds be slaughtered for them, and be enough for them? Or shall all the fish of the sea be gathered together for them, and be enough for them?' And the Lord said to Moses, 'Is the Lord's hand shortened? Now you shall see whether my word will come true for you or not.' So Moses went out and told the people the words of the Lord, and he gathered 70 men of the elders of the people and placed them around the tent. Then the Lord came down in the cloud and spoke to him, and took some of the Spirit that was on him, and put it on the 70 elders. And as soon as the Spirit rested on them, they prophesied, but they did not continue doing it. Now 2 men remained in the camp, one named Eldad and the other named Medad, and the Spirit rested on them. But they were among those registered, but they had not gone out to the tent. And so they prophesied in the camp. And a young man ran and told Moses, "Eldad and Medad are prophesying in the camp." And Joshua the son of Nun, the assistant of Moses from his youth, said, "My lord Moses, stop them." But Moses said to him, "Are you jealous for my sake? Would that all the Lord's people were prophets, that the Lord would put his Spirit on them." And Moses and the elders of Israel returned to the camp. Then the wind of the Lord sprang up, and it brought quail from the sea, and let them fall beside the camp. And about a day's journey on this side, and a day's journey on the other side around the camp, and about 2 cubits above the ground. And the people rose all that day, and all night, and all the next day, and gathered the quail. Those who gathered least gathered 10 homers, and they spread them out for themselves all around the camp. While the meat was yet between their teeth, before it was consumed, the anger of the Lord was kindled against the people, and the Lord struck down the people with a very great plague. Therefore, the name of that place was called Kibroth Hattaavah, because they buried the people who had the craving. From Kibroth Hattaavah, the people journeyed to Hazeroth, and they remained at Hazeroth. Any theme there that you picked out?
I would say don't whine about what happened.
Don't whine about what happened. Amen. And the people complained. You know, that's the only time they complained the whole journey. Oh, there were more times. Oh, yes, yes. Yeah, they didn't have water. They came to the place to where they were trapped as the Israelites were coming on them, and the people panicked. Yep, time after time. Let's see. Now the rabble, verse 4, was among them, had a strong craving, and the people of Israel wept again, saying, "Oh, that we had meat to eat. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt that cost nothing, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic." That makes me hungry just hearing that. Why does God not like complaining? Because it's not trusting. Very good, Tom. It shows a lack of trust. Why do we love to complain? We want our own way? A habit? Ouch, that one hurt. Yes. We get into a habit of complaining about things. Someone called it stinking thinking. Now, none of us here complain, do we? I do struggle with complaining. Stupid, 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 I tell myself. Wait a minute, that's complaining. You had your hand up?
Well, it was. Have you ever eaten at McDonald's?
That's the gourmet place right here on Airport. Yes, yes. It's a good Scottish restaurant. McDonald's. Yeah, we find the smallest things to complain about. The biggest things to complain about, and everything in between. We don't have to search very far to find things to complain about. Was it legitimate what the people were complaining about? But now our strength is dried up, and there's nothing at all but this manna to look at. I wonder if they had one of those, those cookbooks that you have with the comb, the plastic comb, you punch the holes in it. You have that, recipes for manna. And you sound like, who's the fella from that movie about 30 years ago? Got boiled manna, fried manna, popcorn manna. Yeah, Mr. Gump. There were different places. When you listen to how the description, now the manna was like coriander seed. Does anybody know what coriander seed is? Really? It's seasoning. Is it good? I mean, you're not going to eat it right out of the bottle, but probably it's...
Well, it's primarily used in a lot of Swedish cooking for cardamom bread or something, some breads.
Some breads, okay.
So I think that is pretty tasty.
All right. It was like coriander seed, and appearance was like that of bdellium. What does bdellium look like? When I see that, I think of Greece, molybdenum. Does anybody know what that Greece is? Am I even pronouncing it? That's all I can think of. But apparently, it had it was like coriander seed, and its appearance. So it apparently had a good appearance and a good taste to it. And the people went about gathering it and ground it into it with hand mills and beat it into mortars and boiled it in pots and made cakes of it. Now, we're going into the South, Janine and I, this next week, and we're going to visit a place where they make donuts. What's the name of that donut place? Krispy Kreme, yes. Have you ever stood in the Krispy Kreme and watched them come off the conveyor belt? And they drizzle the what is it, the glazing on it? And it's almost like eating foam because it just melts in your mouth. It just melts in. And it's not quite as good as the second day that if you're allowed, but when you eat it fresh. But think of being able to eat this like that all the time. And there were different recipes. You could boil it, you could bake it, you could roll it up, you could flatten it out, whatever you wanted to do with it, if you were clever enough for a recipe. But they said, that's all we have to look at. Boy, if we just had cucumbers or melons or leek, or garlic, all of these things. But what were they really telling the Lord? Wasn't giving them enough of what they wanted. We want more. Now the giving of the manna is going to go on for 40 years. And it says that the day that they went in, the manna stopped. Because after the 40 years, when they went into the promised land, everything was there. They had houses, they had vineyards, they had gardens. Everything was there for them. They had the food. It was ready to, it was like in real estate, they call it a turnkey.
They didn't have the complainers that went into that city. The complainers, it was incentives.
Yes, it says, now the rabble was among them and had a strong craving. What's the rabble? The whiners, troublemakers. Randy, what did you say? Kind of like today. Yeah. It doesn't take very much for that to poison someone's attitude. People can be going along thinking, this is just great, and then someone reminds them of how terrible things are. And the next thing you know, I guess it is terrible. It just takes a little bit of poison in this. And Moses says, you brought me all of these people. They weren't mine. They were yours. And here I am. Can you imagine what it's like to be Moses? Now, Moses' father-in-law, Jethro, had told him earlier, while he was, before this, to divvy up the circumstance, or the responsibilities. Divvy them up so that you don't take all these complaints. But here we have the same thing happening. Moses just has this heaped on his shoulders as a leader. Can you imagine what it was like to be a leader in that? And knowing and seeing what you had seen. God parted the Red Sea. He destroyed the Egyptians that were following you. We have water that comes out of the rock. We have this, manna means, it literally means, what is this? That's what manna means in Hebrew. It means, what is this? They didn't really know what it was, but every day they go out, and there it is on the ground. They just pick it up and gather it together. And on the sixth day, they gather twice as much so that they don't have to go out on the seventh day. Miraculous any way you look at it. But it's never enough. If I had a long list here of numbers, we said, all right, let's start to say all the things that we're thankful for over here. Because this is your right side, and right is always right. And then over here we have the not so right, which is left. Things we can complain about. Could the list on the left be as long as the one on the right? You bet. You bet it could be. We haven't got enough rain. I've got worms in my apple tree. The humidity's too high. I can't keep the house cool enough. I have to refrigerate my beef jerky. And there's just no end to things we can complain about, is there?
These people just never had nothing. I mean, I know what it's like to go without food. And I've been there. This is just people that are used to having everything happen, and they're just not grateful that they're getting something. You know, just anything.
Yes, and God was giving them everything. They did have, apparently, a lot, according to verses 4 and 5. Back in Egypt. They had all of that, but they were slaves.
And they had to have good food so they could work hard. So evidently the Egyptians did.
They had food.
Food life.
The Nile Delta is one of the richest soils in the world. It's like the Mississippi Delta. All of that topsoil keeps flooding. It doesn't now because of the Aswan Dam that was built 50, 60 years ago. It doesn't flood like it used to, but all of that topsoil that would come from south, from Lake Victoria and on up, all that would flood and re-nourish the soil every single year. They had the best soil they could possibly have. And now they're going out into this wilderness, the wilderness of sin. And it's pretty bleak when you look at the pictures that are there now. It's pretty bleak. There was nothing. It wasn't like they were going to plant crops and wait for them to come up. And Moses says, 600,000. We'd have to kill all of the animals in order to do this. God says, well, I'm going to give you something. It's not just for a day or 2 days or 10 days or 20, but for a whole month. And did you get how deep it was? When those quail, some people think that the word was translated, should have been fish that came up from the sea, but it says quail. When it says it was 2 cubits, how deep is 2 cubits? 36 inches. So we're talking, the light switch is 48 inches up, so we're talking somewhere this deep. Anybody around here, we call them rough grouse. I think, do they call them quail in the south that you guys hunt? Partridge. I love the taste of partridge. I used to love to hunt partridge and get them, but it took a lot of partridge to make a meal. 3 feet deep in quail. You want food? I'll give you food. It's the complaining that really gets to Moses, and it gets to God too. When we come to the New Testament, we're going to read several times where it talks about don't complain. Don't complain. Because complaining for myself, even within myself, if I never vocalize it, what does complaining do to my spirit? What does it do to your spirit? It dulls it. It makes me unthankful and ungrateful. What does it take to change the attitude? To become lots of prayer? Being thankful. Recognizing the blessings. Maybe we have to sing the song, Count Your Many Blessings. Sometimes you have to do that.
We're also blessed. We don't understand how blessed we are.
We are blessed in ways that if we had our list over here, we'd run out of time to think about how blessed that we are. Regardless, I'm going to make a bold statement here. Everyone here has problems. Anybody here not have problems? And if you don't, let me give you my list. Everyone here has problems. Everyone here has issues. Everyone has things happening in their life that are maybe catastrophic. And I wouldn't wish to have some of your problems. And I don't think you wish to have mine either. We all have them. Not just because it's us, but everyone does.
Life.
It is life.
As soon as you fix one problem, you got two more.
Yeah. Yep. It's like the little Dutch boy. And that water that's coming through the dam?
But does complaining ever help them?
Yeah. I think of one of the great movies that was ever made is It's a Wonderful Life with Jimmy Stewart. And Jimmy Stewart himself was just coming out of World War II, in which he flew bombing missions. They say this movie was closer to home than we could imagine to him, of how his life, he lived with PTSD and all those bombing runs. But within that movie, he had to be shown of how life was going to be so much different if he had never been here. So it takes a sense of being able to see things differently in life if we are given to, even if we never voice it, boy, that person is happy. But inside, something's working. Something's grinding in them. Some people, they may be really happy, but they complain a lot. Yes, that is a problem. And so Moses has this to deal with. And in the process of Moses complaining to God, and now we weigh in on this one and say, is it right to complain to God?
I think we should be careful on how we do it.
Be careful on how we do it, okay?
Depends on what the problem is.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, if we, let's say we go to Noah and complain about the water that's in our basement. You say, you think you got problems now. So God listens to Moses, and in verse 16, and the Lord said to Moses, gather for me 70 men out of the elders of Israel. So I'm going to take some of the spirit that I've given to you, I'm going to put it on the 70 as a way of helping them. And it's interesting as they go through all of this that we come down to 27, verse 27. A young man ran and told Moses, Eldad and Medad are prophesying in the camp, and Joshua the son of Nun, the assistant of Moses from his youth, said, my Lord Moses, stop them. Stop them. And one of the great verses that I think is a prophetic to the time that we live in now, when Moses said, are you jealous for my sake? Would that all the Lord's people were prophets, that the Lord would put his Spirit on them. Did you ever consider that in light of what we are today? That God has put his Spirit in all of us. And in a sense, we're all prophets. Why? Because we're able to expound on the Word of God, because we all have equal access to this, whether we are educated or not. We're able to have the Word of God. And think of what it must have been like in that day to where only Moses, maybe only Aaron, had the Spirit of God. God says, I'm going to take it from you, and I'm going to give it to 70, and they're going to help you. And they were jealous. Tell them to stop. But Moses says, oh, they all were prophets, and all had the Spirit of God. It's an amazing passage that goes on here. Everything that happens in Numbers chapter 11 it's a lot to take in, but it's one of those great chapters in the Bible. And that's what this class is about, is the great chapters, because we could talk about all of the sacrifices, whether it's cows or whether it's sheep or whether it's goats or whether it's grains or what have you. And that would be a fascinating study, wouldn't it? Everybody shake their head, make me feel good. Oh, we would just, because there are dozens and dozens of different sacrifices. Oh, we could talk about what it means to be ceremonially cleansed. We could spend an entire class on that. Wouldn't that be interesting? Shake your head and say, yeah, fascinating.
Are you looking for complainers?
Yeah, no, I'm not looking for complainers. I know you're not going to complain. You're going to say, oh, yes, we would love that. But chapters like this really focus our attention on these people. And remember, centuries later, And this takes place about 1500 BC. And more than 1500 years later, Paul is going to call to remembrance this passage to the Corinthians. And don't be like those complainers. And now, nearly 2,000 years later from when Paul writes that, is that still pretty good advice? Don't be like those complainers. Murmurers. Complain. What's another good word? Murmurers, complainers, whiners. What is it? Bellyachers. Translated from Greek, I imagine, isn't it? Belly. That's a term.
The Greek would be Bellius Icarus.
Bellius Icarus, yes. Yes, and that's a term my mother, I forgot about that. My mother would say, stop your belly aching. You know, because when you had a belly ache, you just, from eating too many green apples. This is the time of year you eat green apples, by the way. Do not go out and eat green apples right now. But as this isn't the first time that Israel complains, and it won't be the last time that they complain. They send the spies, 12 of them, one from each tribe, and they're going to go into the land. Moses sends them in to spy out the land. And what do they find? They find really two different things. They find over here on the right side, and they need to put a pole between two people, two men, to carry back the grapes. Those are big grapes. And they tell about what a wonderful land that it is. A land flowing with milk and honey. And then, on the other side, 10 of the 12 say, those guys are like giants. And we're like grasshoppers. In their sight and in our sight. And guess who wins out? When you hold it side by side, and this is one of the things that I've learned that I think Eisenhower made it famous in his. He used to put things in two columns and be able to delineate all of this. And I think it goes back to Benjamin Franklin, and Washington did it, but Eisenhower made it famous in our generations. But you'd put the list of goods and bads and line them up. And all of these things, a land flowing with milk and honey, and they even had the grapes to show the people. This is what's waiting for us over there. But then we just look like grasshoppers to them. And we believe it. And they swayed everybody. It didn't take much complaining to sour the whole situation, did it? How sad. And it took them 40 years to learn the lesson. And at the end, we're reminded that at the end of 40 years, their clothes didn't wear out. Their shoes didn't wear out. And they had water and they had food every day, because God was watching over them. And Paul says in his letter to the Corinthians, who was the rock that followed them? It was Christ. Christ was the rock that followed them, watching over them. And sometimes we just can't see it. Maybe busy complaining. And what's the cure for complaining? Gratitude. Pardon me, Debbie?
Use a conscientious effort.
Use a conscientious effort. Maybe a sticky note on the mirror, in your bathroom, in the hallway, in the door when you go out in the morning. If you're driving, on the rear view mirror every time you look. Unless you need that mirror for driving. I don't want someone to come back. I got in an accident because you don't put that sticky note in there. Put it in a safe place. a reminder everywhere. It rather sounds like what the Israelites were told in Deuteronomy chapter 6. What was it that they were supposed to put to remind them all the time? Put it around your doorpost, lentils in front of the eyes, frontlets in your eyes, pardon me, to remind us. But now we have that law written not on tablets of stone, but that law is written on our hearts. And that should be enough, shouldn't it? Should be enough to remind us every day. And what tugs us away from that? Tugs us to, I'm going to use a Star Wars term, to the dark side. The dark side is easier. It is easier to complain, isn't it? Sometimes it is hard to say, no matter what is going on, I'm still going to be grateful. I'm going to think about everything that I have. And sometimes my realm goes into, I have a job. I love my job. I have cars that run reasonably well. I live in a mansion, an absolute mansion that perhaps 99% of the world doesn't live in a house as nice as mine. Air conditioned, running water. What's not to like about this? And I got a basement. I have food every day, more than I really need, as you can tell. I just have so many things, and that's just the physical. Now I go even further, and I think about all of the spiritual blessings that I have. I have salvation in Christ. I have a direct line to God. Anytime. And he tells us, Peter says, take all your troubles to God, for he cares for you. Yeah. Anytime, day or night, the line is open. I have an enormous family beyond just you here. I have family everywhere in the world who would be willing to put me up, day or night, wouldn't you? Let the record show. Well, when I come back, I don't want to get that welcome back card that says by a vote of 66 to 52, welcome back. I'm loved. I'm loved by a lot of people, and I love a lot of people. That's the family. That's the family that Jesus said that you've given up everything, but now you've got mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters. He was talking about the church. He was talking about the kingdom. These are all your relatives. Though they may have kicked you out because of your newfound faith in me, I've given you something even greater. And in heaven, eternity. He says we'll also have troubles. Chapter 11 is really one of those beautiful chapters that over and over we come back to see, to center ourselves, to realize how blessed that we are. And a saying that I've used is, how's that saying go again? The smart person learns from their own mistakes. The wise person learns from other people's mistakes. You don't have to make all the mistakes. Everyone else has made the mistakes for you. Learn from them. And Paul writes in the book of Romans that all these things have been recorded for us to teach us, to give us hope. All these things are written for us, are there for our encouragement. And reading these, we learn from them. We may have done well to get through the book of Genesis, because Genesis is a fascinating book to read. And we can sail right through that in just a matter of hours, days, weeks, however long it takes you to get there. We get to Exodus, and we are going full bore, because we're reading about Moses, we're reading about all the plagues, and we're reading about the the Egyptians, and then all of a sudden we get to the last half of the book of Exodus, and that whole list of everything that the temple or the tabernacle is made of, all of the clothing, and it starts to list that. And then we get to Leviticus and all the laws, and we get to Numbers, and we think, Numbers? That sounds like the G word, genealogy. And we sort of lose our pep. What's that?
Momentum.
Yeah, we lose our momentum. We lose our momentum. But in there are all of the little golden nuggets, those, I say it over and over, the little breadcrumbs that we keep, that just keep leading us. And it's all there to encourage us and to guide us. And right there in the middle of it, in all of this complaining that the people do, and Moses, it just weighs him down. You can feel for him because he's bearing the burden of all the people. And God says, I've got the solution. And Moses keeps going until the next time. We sail right into, we got plenty of time. We get finished with chapter 11. And then all of a sudden, when everything is going well, we run right into chapter 12, verse 1. Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because the Cushite woman whom he had married, for he had married a Cushite woman. What's a Cushite woman? She was from Africa. Some people believe Cush is southern Egypt, maybe Ethiopia. Anyways, he married someone that wasn't part of the tribe. And they said, has the Lord indeed spoken only through Moses? Has he not spoken through us also? And the Lord heard it. Now the man Moses was very meek, more than all the people who were on the face of the earth. Did Moses write this? Just something I always like to throw out there when I read this. And suddenly the Lord said to Moses and to Aaron and Miriam, come out here, you three, to the tent of meeting. And the three of them came out, and the Lord came down in a pillar of cloud and stood at the entrance of the tent and called Aaron and Miriam. And they both came forward. Can you imagine being in that principal's office? Hear my words. If there is a prophet among you, I, the Lord, make myself known to him in a vision. I speak with him in a dream. Not so with my servant Moses. He is faithful in all my house. With him I speak mouth to mouth, clearly, and not in riddles, and he beholds the form of the Lord. Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses? And the anger of the Lord was kindled against him, and he departed. When the cloud removed from over the tent, behold, Miriam was leprous, like snow. And Aaron turned toward Miriam, and behold, she was leprous. And Aaron said to Moses, O my Lord, do not punish us, because we have done foolishly and have sinned. Let her not be as one dead, whose flesh is half eaten away, when he comes out of his mother's womb. And Moses cried to the Lord, O Lord, O God, please heal her, please. But the Lord said to Moses, if her father had but spit in her face, should she not be shamed for 7 days? Let her be shut outside the camp 7 days, and after that she may be brought in again. So Miriam was shut outside the camp 7 days, and the people did not set out on the march till Miriam was brought in again. After that the people set out from Hazeroth and camped at the wilderness of Paran. It just seems like Moses keeps getting beat down, doesn't it? Even his own brother and sister, his older brother and his older sister. Miriam, I believe, was 7 years older, and Aaron was, I believe, 4 years. She was 4 years younger, and Aaron was 7 years younger, if I remember it right. Has God only spoken to you? Has he not spoken through us also? Really, what they're saying is, who put you in charge? Yes, Jesus and his brothers, and they were doubters until afterwards. Most people believe that James and Jude, who wrote their letters, were the actual brothers, blood brothers to Jesus. They became believers eventually in that. It's tough for Moses when it says that, and that is put in there in verse 3, now the man Moses was very meek more than all the people who are on the face of the earth. What does it mean to be meek?
Humble goes in there somewhere.
What is it?
Humble goes in there.
Humble, yep. Anybody work with metal? Anybody would know what a malleable metal is? I had somebody who was into engineering. They probably would know that, wouldn't they? Means you can, bendable, you can work with it. Yeah. Metals like copper and gold are malleable because you can work them. Steel, a little bit harder, but the softer the metal, like lead and gold and copper. Same with meek. It means that you're able to be molded. And in this case, when it talks about meek, God was able to mold him, to make him into the person he should be. After all, God speaks with him mouth to mouth, face to face, able to see the form of God. Not his face, but in a sense, face to face. Not so with the other people. But God's able to, day after day, and you can imagine after 40 years of dealing with God face to face, God teaching him. And now brother and sister come up and say, who made you boss? What makes you think you're so hot? That does not intimidate me. But you will, because I know you want to. I know you want to go. But it says that Moses was meek, and for all of the things that came down on his shoulders, it still was a meek person that God was able to use. Questions or comments before they ring that bell 7 or 8 more times?
You would think, well, I would think that being raised by a Pharaoh, the way he was raised, that he wouldn't be so meek, that he could have in his head, I'm Moses, I'm the Pharaoh, I'm
Yeah.
Was he like that, and then after he changed, he went meek, or was he always just a meek person?
I don't know as I have an answer to that. Was Moses always that meek? I don't know as I have an answer for that. I know that in the book of Hebrews and Acts, it tells us that he was raised in Pharaoh's court. Debbie?
I think Moses was able to be set in place and able to work with and able to communicate with himself, with God, and everyone else.
Yeah.
And he was a murderer.
Yeah, he was a murderer.
I think he changed, though. There
Yeah.
was a certain amount of change in him.
Yeah, he gets to learn a lot in 40 years
Right.
herding sheep. Okay, the class is yours. Remember the congregational meeting next Sunday. Be during the Bible class.